Hi, everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes since people keep coming in. And we'll get started soon.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, how are you?
Doing all right. How are you?
Good, doing well.
All right.
All right. Well, Katie, I think we're good to get started. I'll keep adding people in as they keep showing up in the waiting room. So welcome to today's Shellfish Advisory Panel meeting. Today is March 24th.
One addition to today's agenda, after we talk about the Providence River, we will, Tom Angel will be here to provide an update on his Welk Maturity project. So that wasn't posted, but he's just going to be updating us. So that's all.
Thanks, Katie.
With that, Anna, if you want to get us going.
Yeah, so as we all are now very used to virtual meetings, just gonna quickly just go over the basics of how it operates. If you can all just keep yourself muted during the meeting, just to reduce the background noise. If you have a question, you can raise your hand using the raise hand function, and I'll unmute you. You might also be able to unmute yourself. And for those who are phoning in, I will occasionally at the end of the presentation, I'll unmute all of you in case you have comments that you would like to make. All right, and with that, just please keep yourself muted. Sorry, I have 3 screens going and it's not moving. All right, so today's talk is going to be going over Providence River classification and shellfish management. So before we get started on tonight's presentation, I just wanted to make a note that I'd like to keep discussion until the end of the presentation, just to keep things moving, and then we can, sorry, I just have to admit more people. Then we can go back to slides if you have questions on any particular slide as I'm going through the presentation. Secondly, today there are no voting items. So it's just going to be this presentation on the harvest scenarios. And then at the end, Tom will have a little update to provide. So I'm going to be talking about the harvest scenarios for the lower Providence River shellfish management area and how it came up to determine options from the management side. So first, I'd like to go over the current classification for the Providence River. So from the water quality side, for the lower Providence, the entire Providence River is currently closed to shellfishing.
Hey, Anna, just really quick. Are you in presenter mode right now? We're looking
Yeah.
at we're looking at your, or at least I'm looking at your slides in the in the non-presenter mode. Do others see that too? Yeah. So I think
that's the same thing that I said.
okay. I think maybe like a screen swap or something like that.
Okay, yeah, I have 3 screens going. So okay, let's see.
No problem.
Is that still not it?
No, it's like the title slide with the slide panes on the left side.
Okay.
It might be just in Zoom, you have to share the full-blown version.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing for 1 second and I'm gonna start resharing again. Sorry, everyone. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, my mouse is now not working on my computer. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna try leaving the meeting and rejoining because for some reason I can't control Zoom on my computer right now. I don't know why this is happening. Let's see.
Anna, if you want to just pan through those slides in that other view, that's fine too.
I'm sorry. I don't know why I can't all of a sudden. I'm using my laptop, but it's connected to 2 other screens. And now it's just not even letting me, all the controls on my laptop. It's not letting me use anything on my laptop. Like I can't use my mouse or anything.
Do you want to pass me the presentation and have me move through it?
Sure. Let me see. All right, I don't want to like stop the meeting by accident, but I'm having like a lot of strange things happening.
Why don't you, if it's possible, if you want to send me the PDF or the PowerPoint, I can walk through it and have you kind of guide or speak to it then.
Sure. Give me 1 second. I'm just putting it up on the shared drive. Okay, I just sent you the link, Connor.
Can you all see that? Okay,
Great.
perfect, awesome.
Thank you, Connor.
Yeah, no worries.
All right.
So,
Great. So if you could. It's a little different than what I have. If you could just go to the regulatory slide, the one before that, the schedule.
sure.
Perfect, thanks. So I had another slide up here that unfortunately, I guess is not in the version I sent over. So I just wanted to distinguish the difference between currently what the classification is. So currently the Providence River is prohibited to shell fishing. But on the water quality side of things, we've seen improvements. And now we are looking to reclassify the lower section of the Providence River. And this would be a conditional opening. So it would close for 7 days with 1/2 inch of rain. And then on the management side, the Providence River is currently a shellfish management area. So moving forward with this reclassification of the lower Providence River, it'll be easier for us to move things forward because of the currently established shellfish management area. We can go to direct final rule for whatever we decide for proposed shellfish harvest schedule. So looking at the slide, this is the proposed timeline that we're looking at for moving forward. So after this meeting, you'll all have a few weeks to look over what we've discussed today and provide comments to us, or any feedback that you may have. We'll reconvene and have another SAP on the 14th of April where we will vote on a harvest schedule. Then on May 3rd, we will have the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council meeting. And after that, on June 1st, we can move forward with a direct final rule based on what we've come up with for the proposed harvest schedule.
Anna, I would just note that, so the SAP will ultimately provide a recommendation to the council, of which will then provide a recommendation to the director.
Yeah, exactly.
For final decision. And then we would move forward based on that.
Yeah. All right, you can do the next slide, please. All right, so here's a little background. You all may have heard pieces of this presentation before on the Quahog assessment model. This model was used to determine the total Quahog stock size for the Narragansett Bay and Providence River. And the model accounts for the spatial dynamics within the bay population, since we know that no two areas are the exact same. So when it comes to things such as sediment type or water conditions, like temperature and salinity and currents and food circulation, which all influence the Quahog distribution and the population numbers that we see there. So this model has multiple factors incorporated into its calculation, which include the abundance data from the DEM dredge survey, commercial landings data that we've collected, growth and maturity information of quahogs and their fecundity and natural mortality, along with recruitment and connectivity between the regions, which is also data from quahog larval transport work that was performed a while back between DEM, URI, GSO, and Roger Williams. So the final output from this model estimates the total quahog population and the fishing mortality rates and fits to the input data. All right, next slide, please. So connecting this stock assessment model to the Providence River management area, with the information that we gathered from that stock assessment model, we were able to calculate the maximum amount of quahogs harvested, maximum amount of quahog harvest that can occur within that lower Providence River section without a long-term depletion of the stock. And this is also known as the maximum sustainable yield, or MSY. So using this number, we can determine what type of harvest schedule or management plan could be used for this region. So some important factors that we considered for this harvest schedule and stock management are the average number of people that we expect to be fishing the area on an open day, what a typical harvest rate is, and how many clams on average are in a bushel. So using this information, we built a simulation tool to get estimates on how many day openings at various bushel limits could be allowed for the lower Providence River management area. So using that data, we were able to, we collected from the prior transplants and harvest rate studies. All right, the next slide, please. So we were able to use the data that was collected from the most recent 2020 Providence River shellfish transplant or quahog transplant. And at that transplant, we had a total of 58 participants. The data we collected from the transplant included an average of 137 quahog per bushel harvest rate. The average number of bags filled per individual was about 18, from a total of 1,053 bags, but this ranged from 1 to 40 bags filled per individual. We also had start and stop times that were recorded from each individual, from when they signed in at the beginning of the transplant to when they came back and weighed out and counted their bags at the end of the transplant. In addition, you may have noticed some of us DMF staff were there, and we counted, randomly counted 52 bags from the transplant for total counts of living quahog shell, or living quahogs. And that gave us an average of 163 quahogs per 50-pound bag. So the data that we took and included in this simulation tool to come up with the harvest scenarios was the harvest rate from the transplant, which was calculated using the number of bags filled per time to harvest. We also used the number of bags filled, harvest time, and number of individuals to calculate the catch per unit effort for the transplants. Then we used the MSY that was calculated from the assessment model I talked about earlier, and which also counted for the number of potential closure days due to rainfall, as it being a conditional area. Then the expected number of participants, which we set at 100 individuals. We used this number due to prior discussions we'd had with industry, which had expected about 100 participants on that day of that transplant. It ended up being 58 participants, which seemed to be lower than was expected, which could potentially have been due to poor weather conditions on that day. And then lastly, we calculated the management area coefficient, which I'll explain on the next slide. So the management area coefficient is important because it's the harvestable area of the Providence River. So it's the subsection of the shellfish management area that is proposed for reclassification. So we calculated this because the maximum sustainable yield, the MSY that I mentioned earlier, needed to be scaled from the entire Providence River. So if you see on the image here, that's the image on the left, the DMF dredge survey strata number 19 is the entire Providence area, Providence River growing area. So we used the area that's calculated from that survey. And so we needed to scale it down from that to the size of the smaller shellfish management area proposed for opening, which comes out to be 58% of the Providence River dredge survey area. And that's the area shown on the image on the right, which is the Office of Water Resources classification map of the lower Providence River. And that would be the sub area that would be open for harvest. All right, you move to the next slide, please. So the slide everyone's been waiting for. From this quahog simulation tool, we came up with a variety of harvest scenarios. So the assessment model, along with traditional buffers, indicated that the Providence River tentatively could have 2 million quahogs harvested from the region annually. I would like to note that the MSY numbers seem to be a little bit high, so we're working on a potential update that might affect this number slightly. But from the simulator, we were able to then derive specific bushel rates per hour and how many hours could be fished, which brings us to these options listed below in blue lettering. So and I just want to say this is for bushel limits for the entire year. This is hours per year. So at a 3 bushel per hour possession limit, there would be a total of 57 harvestable hours a year. At a 1.5 bushels per hour possession limit, there would be a total of 106 harvestable hours a year. And then at a 1 bushel per hours limit, it would be 157 harvestable hours per year. Now, using these numbers, we can think about the opening scenarios as the following below here in the bottom half of the slide. So now we've divided it up so that we're still looking at it as the 3 bushels, the 1.5 bushels, and the 1 bushel limit, but broken into 3-hour or 6-hour openings. And so these are the following scenarios that you would get. So I'll just read these out for you. So at a 3 bushel per hour limit for a 3-hour opening, so that brings us to 9 bushels per day, you get 19 days per year. Now looking at 1.5 bushels and looking at for a 3-hour opening, that brings us to 4.5 bushels per day, which gives you 35 days per year. Now, if you do it at a 6-hour opening, you get 6 bushels per day, but at 17 days per year. And then the final two, looking at the 1 bushels per hour. So for a 3-hour opening, that gives you 3 bushels a day, coming out to 52 days per year. Then for a 6-hour opening, that gives you 6 bushels per day for 26 days per year. So I know we're going to come back to this slide, but just have a couple more notes to make. So next slide, please. So we spoke with law enforcement, and they had some further things to consider when coming up with the potential harvest schedule. So the things that they've mentioned were having a manageable time of day and a week that has a 3 bushel possession limit would be preferable for them, and they would prefer like a midweek schedule. Something to keep in mind too is the summer opening would create a bit of a burden for their law enforcement staff. And lastly, shore digging is expected to be popular in this area due to ease of access. So just taking that in consideration too. All right, and last slide, please. So what we are looking for from all of you is inputs on the simulation. So do the numbers sound reasonable to you? Do you think 100 participants sounds like something that we would expect to see coming out there when this area would open? What your preferences are on the bushel limits versus the time of day the area is open, and then how would you like to see these days spread out over a year? Would you want it only in seasonal opening? Do you want it spread out throughout the entire year, summer or fall? So, we have some different options to work with. So we can now open it up to discussion with everyone. I guess I'll start by, are there questions anyone has?
Yeah, Kurt.
Hi, Kurt.
Hey, just an observation or question. Regardless of the scenario we get into, it's open, we find it to be detrimental to the resource as far as.
Sorry, Kurt, it's a little muffled. I can't hear you very well.
How's that?
That's better. Thanks.
Regardless of the scenario we enter into, what is the agency's ability to, if in fact we have abundance from this area, do we have the ability to close?
I'm sorry, I got muffled again right at that. Is it just me? I don't know. Maybe it's just my computer.
No, it's for me too, Anna. Still hard to hear you, Kurt. Sorry.
Yeah, same here. Let me check something.
Is that any better, Anna?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Okay. Just an observation on any of the scenarios we enter into, if we start to see an abundance of take, was the agency have the ability to back off any of those scenarios? If we say it's going to be open for whatever, 56 days, whatever, and we see that there's an abundance of take at 26 days, will we have the ability to fluctuate that as we do like quota management? Or will we be stuck to that same schedule with the regulations in place?
Connor, can I defer that to you?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I'd have to look, Kurt. We traditionally don't do it that way, but we could probably structure regs to allow for that. Like we'd have to just be clear as to what the authority or the power is there. Kind of like how we did this past year for winter harvest schedules, but in the opposite direction. The other option would be, we could. I'm thinking like if it was open in part of the summer as a trial or like to see how things were going, and then we had time to evaluate like part of the early fall, and then depending on those numbers could reopen it for more days in the late fall through the winter type of thing. So like I could see probably two different routes there. One kind of calling for specific authority or delegation within it to the agency or to the director, and then or to try and structure it within it, kind of having this two different periods in there to allow us to evaluate kind of midstream.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. I was just, I was concerned if we ended up picking any one of the options and we got too far into it down the road on this, that it wouldn't be beneficial to anybody, industry, resource or otherwise, if we kept it up and didn't manage it. So just throwing that idea out there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mike Rice here. It would seem to me that some of the MSY modeling would be fairly sensitive to growth rates, and depending on where you are in the Narragansett Bay area, they're quite a bit different. Are you being reasonably conservative with that, or which ones are you using?
You want me to answer that, Anna?
That would be great. So Connor and Jason were the ones that originally developed this model, so Connor has a better understanding.
So thanks for the question, Mike. And so effectively, the assessment model is basically looking at the entire Narragansett Bay region. So for the model itself, we used a bay-wide growth rate. Where the regions become specific is more so in how recruitment can be applied spatially, between these three areas that were in the first slide. So while growth is not specific to the river, I would say that it's representative of the bay, both in terms of the work that Kelly Henry had done prior, as well as a recent update of that growth information we did a year or two ago to really see if it's changed under a different nutrient environment, which it hadn't. So fairly confident that through time the growth rates are pretty stable, but it's using a bay-wide growth for the bay-wide purposes of the model.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, that I think that underscores, and I think that Kurt's question then becomes wise, because I think in a number of the, like Greenwich Cove and basically the upper bay, there's a sort of a depression of growth rates in comparison to the bay-wide average, that in terms of some of my experience on these things. So there's these sort of regional differences. So it might be good to be thinking a little bit conservatively about this. So I just throw that out as a caveat.
It looks like Jason wants to weigh in. Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. I just wanted to sort of, tag into what Connor just said. This is a really good discussion. So thanks, Dr. Rice, for raising it. So in agreement with everything Connor said, and wanted to add that, the modeling framework that we used could actually accommodate differing growth morphs in the different areas. It allows for that. We just didn't feel comfortable enough, with the data that we had available to us. But that's a progression that the model can take into the future. Additionally, it models growth with uncertainty. So there is some uncertainty within the growth equation, but I still think what Dr. Rice just said is really valuable, that I think you want to buffer, towards some being conservative with some of this stuff. There's lots of uncertainties in the model, so it's an important consideration to kind of assess it in that kind of risk framework. And that's an area where you'd want to be more risk averse. So thanks, Anna, for the couple of minutes there.
Thank you, Jason. Exactly. Thank you.
Jerry, looks like you have a question. Jerry, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I believe these numbers are, I don't know where these numbers came from, but 163 core hogs per bushel is what you have here, right?
Yeah, let's bring it back to that summary slide, please. Thank you.
Jerry, was it this one or from the
Or
transplant?
the transplant?
No, you're basing everything on a bushel being 163 core hogs, right? Isn't that what I read?
So that's from the transplant data. So we calculated that based on counts that we had made when we were out there. So yes, that's what it's based on.
Okay, you do understand that when you're digging, commercially, you're not going to keep 163 core hogs per bushel. I think the numbers, there's something wrong with the numbers, because if you take a count neck, a 5-gallon pail, or like even a mid neck, it's right around 300 or 350. And that's, I think that's conservative. Some of those areas that they're really small could be more, but that's what I don't understand. 100 people are going to be throwing the big stuff back and trying to get the more marketable, the more, the higher price stuff, because now you're looking at 30 cents a pound for a 5-gallon pail. That's $15, or you're going to get whatever. Right now it's like in the high 20s, saving 30 cents just to round it off, and you're going to go for 400 pieces in a bucket. That's $120. So I just 100. I mean, I'm just shocked that you counted all these core hogs and you put 163 per bushel, knowing how we sell core hogs, how we dig core hogs, and commercially, because through the program that we had, all the different sizes. I'm just really surprised to see that 163, and that's how you calculated everything. And I think these numbers are nuts, to be honest with you.
So Jerry, if this is Connor, so thanks for your reply. I mean, we have looked at typical size composition for data too from the different fleet programs we've done. What we've done is try to understand from marketable size classes, like what would be then available to harvest. Now, if there's further information about what's caught versus then what is thrown back and stuff, we can update that certainly. So I guess, you know, for if from the 163 we can scale the size composition even more appropriately to say, you know, they're only looking at top necks and they're not looking at, or in little necks, they're not looking, we're not considering chowders and such. If that would be really helpful feedback for us. So I guess we can look back at that size composition information and really get a better understanding of what of the catches, even with removing sublegal size, what of the catch is going to be actually truly harvested. So I mean, it's something that we can certainly still address. Is my point.
No, I understand, but yeah, sorry.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Hey, Anna, so this might be like sort of like a rudimentary question. I'm not a digger. My dad digs at a water bay, and in the beginning, you talked a little bit about water quality. So is this related to water quality, and is there some type of like correlation between the two? And or is this like a new thing to address like reduction in supply? I guess like where did this come from, and what does it have to do with water quality? Would be my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so the reason we're having this discussion about harvesting from the Lower Providence River is because over time, so currently the entire Providence River is prohibited to shellfishing due to water quality. With improvements to the water quality in the Lower Providence River area, which has been monitored through the DEM Office of Water Resources, they've determined that this area, this Lower Providence section of the Lower Providence River is it is potentially, or not potentially, but it is meeting classification for a conditionally open area for up to a ½ inch of rain. So if we get a ½ inch of rainfall, then it brings in effluent and bacteria levels get too high to harvest from the area, and then it shuts down for 7 days. So because of these improvements to water quality in the area, we can now open this area to harvesting shellfish. So there's two sides to the shellfish work here. So there's the management side from us at Marine Fisheries, where we have to determine what would be the most sustainable way to open this area to harvest without completely depleting the population. And then there's also the water quality side, making sure that it's okay to harvest shellfish for human consumption from the area. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So are there other areas in the bay that have similar like limitations, like based off quantity that you predict how much can be reasonably taken?
Yeah, so there's quite a few shellfish management areas in the bay. And Greenwich Bay is a good example of this type of scenario that's very similar to what we're trying to establish here.
Okay, and then my second question would be, if you know that there's 2 million cohogs that you can take or X amount of bushels, why wouldn't they just say like for this summer, that's how many that can be taken, and then once you hit that amount of bushels or that amount of pieces, like then you just shut it down? Like why is it like the hours opening and bushels an hour? Like it seems like doing bushels an hour might sort of tend to somebody who can't catch as fast or something like that, when rather if you just did it in totality. So once 2 million cohogs are hit, you shut it down. It seems like that might be a little more straightforward. So I guess my question would be, why are they doing like 3-hour openings, and why are they doing it by the bushel?
It's for ease of properly managing. So we need to be conservative when we come to trying to open an area like this. We don't want to run into issues of, if we're not having people reporting properly what they're taking from the area, and we all of a sudden have an over harvest of what's available there. So it's important for us to properly manage so that we don't completely deplete what we have that's available there. And so this is how we manage our shellfish and the shellfish management areas.
Anna, could I add to that really quick if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for the question. And the system that you're kind of describing is how we, as Kurt was alluding to earlier, is how we do most of our fin fish. And there's, I think, in our mind, a lot of that comes down to, as Anna described, part of it is like historically based. We haven't typically managed cohogs on a quota type of system like this before. We've typically done it on a management harvest schedule type of scenario. So a lot of what we're seeing for these scenarios is to try and link to how the current management system is for that, but using a kind of quota informed discussion, as you allude to, as to like what would that look like. And so we would, in this scenario, it would be effectively the same, and we would but we, instead of evaluating the performance of it through the season, we would probably evaluate the performance at either intermittent steps or towards the end and see how it worked out. I mean, this is a bit new for how we have approached cohogs. So what you're looking at is using this 2 million cohogs number as a biological guide to what can be harvested, which is new for a lot of what we've been doing for cohogs, and trying to be keeping sustainable fisheries management in mind for cohogs, but then also this, again, melding this type of management system in with what we have currently for much of cohogs in Narragansett Bay. We'd have to think a little bit more about kind of this to the approach that Kurt mentioned as well, in terms of reporting from dealers and making sure we get updated numbers in time. That's something we've often run into issues with in the past for different species, and thus leading to overharvest or changes in rates really quickly in terms of delayed reports and such. So we would have to think through that a bit more in terms of whether that also makes the most sense. My understanding too, and others from the industry can provide feedback here, is that to some degree, the consistency in the days opening provides a little bit more stability over the season or over a year, in terms of knowing when you can and can't go, which is, I think, been favorable for some, but I don't certainly want to speak for the industry at large. It's just a perception or some comments I have received. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for the explanation. And there's definitely a lot of, I feel like a lot of, it makes it easier, like you said, to manage it by the days and the seasons. And then, sorry, I just have one last question. It's obviously, this is all really like strictly based on the survey and the amount of cohogs that you anticipate being able to be taken. Like, has there ever been like an attempt at to build anything that could like scan like the ocean or something to like actually figure out what cohogs are out there? Like, I know there's a lot of like grants involved. Like, has there ever been like hardware or tech that tried to like enable that process, rather than just like a survey that tried to guess it? And then a little off topic, I guess, but I'm just curious as far as why it's not more of like a technologically driven process. Well, it is, but yeah.
Connor, do you want to reply to that?
Sure. So I think
Yeah.
one of the, so thanks for your question again. And I guess I would say that, I guess I would argue it is technically driven, in that the survey is used to basically scale. Well, it's used to basically guide how the population has changed through time. So what we use the dredge survey and these other types of surveys for is to get a sense of how abundance changes from year to year, not in terms of its directionality, not so much saying this is X percent, this and that. The harvest and growth rates and maturity and the relationship between new recruits and the spawners that they came from, a lot of those are what's used to really scale the population to size. The tools and technology you described is definitely used for other species. I would say that it's pretty common for things like surf clams, ocean quahog, and the northern clam or bay quahogs to kind of follow this type of method of using survey that can sample the bottom, get a sense of spatial temporal changes in abundance or how abundance changes through space and time, and then ultimately use that to help inform the population. Effectively, the technical thing is it's a big, huge statistical model that's run to estimate all these numbers.
Yeah, thank you for answering my questions. And yeah, I guess I meant more like hardware driven or something. I'm not sure, but thank you again for answering. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, there's some techniques using side scan sonar and so forth, but then again, those need to be calibrated up against certain standard dredge techniques anyway to be fully valuable. The dredge techniques are really the gold standard.
All right, we have some more questions here. Tom, you have your hand raised? Tom Angel?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Mine's a real quick question. With these rates, don't you need to know how many people are actually in there digging as well? Or am I missing something? Maybe I am. I apologize if I am, but that's my question.
No, that's okay. So as I said earlier, we estimated these rates are based on 100 participants. We looked at it plus or minus 20 also. And this was a number that we were provided from industry based on what we would expect to see on a typical, like if we were to have for that transplant, like they expected to see 100 people come out, and based on other conversations we've had, that's kind of what they expect to see on a day, although that obviously can vary and might decrease with time, but that's what we used was 100 participants.
Oh, all right, thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't account for that, but that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Jared.
No, I don't know if you probably wouldn't do it now but couldn't you just do like a 2-hour opening and have everyone give their license like they did for the transplant and take whatever they would normally take. You would actually take less than digging there for 4 hours and transplanting it. And then you would also see how much you would actually take, seeing how you would be picking, because you have to sort the stuff. A lot of people are dumping shells, everything into the bag. So you don't really have that accurate to me, I don't think you really have that accurate of a reading of how much you took out of there with 58 guys, whatever it is. But then you'd have more of an idea of what is actually there. And then if you had everybody show what they caught, you would have and you did a count of, a few boats, you see how many quags are actually caught. You would actually have a little more idea of one, how many people actually showed up, how many harvesters would be there. And two, you would see how much they're actually catching.
Yeah, so thank you. You made some very good points. So during our transplant, we actually did count the number of live quahogs in bags randomly selected so that we could get a sense of how many were actually alive. And what they could actually bring to market. Because there were some bags we did find when we were going through them that probably half of it was dead. So the counts that we made were based on what we found that was alive in the bags. So we randomly pulled 52 bags and counted those bags. And that's the number that we used in our simulation. I think as you mentioned with trying to have a harvest scenario set up with 2-hour opening where you take people's licenses, I think that would just be a real big pull for enforcement. That would mean they'd have to be out there tracking everyone very carefully. And that's a really big ask for them. Typically having these kind of harvest schedules has worked in the past. So, but I really appreciate that input.
I have a question.
Yes.
John McDonald. You said, you counted how many cogs are out of each bag. 163, I guess you said. But if you took a 50-pound bag, how many pounds of dead stuff and shells were in that bag, as opposed to a 50-pound bag of full cogs, just cogs? Your number would be much higher than that. So that's going to skew all the numbers in your survey just by, if you're going by 50 pounds and, let's say 25% of it is junk, essentially, that, like you said, Jared said, you're going to pick through this stuff and you're going to take a 50-pound bag. And now your number is going to be exact. It's going to be, 250, 300, whatever, depending on where you're working. So I just think that number skews your data quite a bit when it comes to how many cogs are available to be harvested.
Thank you for the comment. So the way that we look at it is when everyone was out there during the transplant, they're filling these, this is them at their max capacity or whatever their average harvest rate. They put whatever they got at that average harvest rate and put it in the bag and brought it over and we counted it. Yes, there obviously would be time spent sorting and picking out stuff that that's dead and that would impact the actual harvest rate. But that's built into the fact that that's kind of built in with that harvest rate and how much time it takes to harvest that amount. And we're trying to be conservative here too, because we don't want to be throwing out a number that's really high and then having to rein it back in when we find that we've really come up with something that's not manageable. I don't know, Connor, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, just that, John, I think your point is valid. And I think that that math that you're talking about, and Anna can correct me if I'm wrong, but that dead stuff that was in there, like in a given bushel, that's removed to, that's why we went and redid the numbers, because we weren't sure how well a bushel up there or such would equate to total number of cohogs as it would for Greenwich Bay or somewhere else in the bay. So my understanding is that the 163 represents live cohogs with the broken shell or empty dead clams out of it. So that was part of the exercise to try and make sure we had a number that was more representative of that area and to address those concerns.
Right. So what you're saying is if you took a 50-pound bushel, do you know how many cogs are in a 50-pound bushel from that area? Because if you took 2 bags, let's say, dumped them out, just threw, filled up a bushel with random cogs out of those 2, you would get a 50-pound bag. And how many would be in it? Because you're not going to get that out of a 50-pound bag from the transplant.
Yeah, so if, I guess if I'm following you, I think ideally we'd have to do the math and see to what degree, like what that percentage was of like what was and go back and do that calculation. But my guess is that yeah, we could back calculate in like what if what accounting for that is live cohogs in that bushel as opposed to dead stuff, what that actually results in as by also taking into account Jerry Shea's earlier comment of what is actually then being harvested, so that we could circle back on that and look at those numbers and look at that again.
Yeah, I mean, if you took 10 bull rakers and put them in the same spot, you might get 3 or 4 that are just superior diggers, and they're going to catch clean and mostly good cogs, and then you're going to get guys that are going to catch more junk and stuff. That's just the nature of the beast. Depends how you work and all those different variables. So I just think that it should, your data should be going by a 50-pound bushel, how many cogs are in that bushel, not what we dug during the transplant. And pulling out the dead ones and all that. I understand you got to pull the dead ones out, but now you might have 30 pounds out of 50. That 20 pounds worth of junk doesn't mean anything. That's just stuff that's down there that's no good, So I think the data should be going off of that.
Yeah, and that's what I think that's what we tried to do, exactly, like to exclude that stuff, which ultimately would result in more cohogs able to be harvested ultimately. And that 163, it represents an average of a number of bags, right? So it's capturing that variability that you're describing of across 10 diggers as an example. So it is a bit, it does capture that kind of that range that you're describing.
Okay. Thank you.
Jared, you have a question again?
Yeah. The other question is, say they were going to put it as a 6 bushel limit or a 3 bushel limit, either one. Are you assuming that if it's a 6 bushel limit, that every fisherman that's there is getting that limit in that day? Is that how you're going to figure it out? So if you allow a 6 bushel, because I don't think, just by working there, I don't think, this is my opinion, if guys work 3 hours, I bet you maybe half the guys will get the 6 bushel limit.
Yeah, so it is based on assuming that these people would be meeting that possession limit. But that's definitely something to consider. Yes, that's important feedback. I appreciate that.
I guess I would just quickly add that what we're assuming is that, what we're taking into account is that people harvest at different rates. So it accounts for some who may not reach that whole limit in 6 hours based on, slower digging or those less efficient. And then it also accounts for those who hit the bushel limit, whether it be in quickly or right at the 6 hour mark. So it captures both of those. And as you can imagine, the smaller limit you have, the more people you have actually hitting the bushel limit. So the higher bushel limit you have on a given day for the simulator, it basically has a wider range of different rates that are there. But if as you crank that bushel limit down, it's more people will hit that, and thus it removes some of that variability. So that variability between people is also accounted for in here, with some not achieving that and some achieving it.
Jerry, do you have another question?
Yes, I do. I'm sitting here trying to figure out why the numbers are so low in the Providence River. I've been up there testing and 2, 3, 4 times, whatever it is, and the abundance is just, and for what you're allowing and what the, you know, what I've caught up there, I just think is just too big of a difference. I'm just trying to figure out how you come up with that number. How much did you use from the transplant as far as the catching, the rate? I'm just trying to figure out how I can explain it. You have your dredge survey, which I've always had issues with, and now you have the transplant, and guys were going for 15. I think it was $15 a bag. So the thing at that time was $15 a bag. Fill up as many bags as you can in, you know, certain amount of hours, and then that's how, you know, the catch rate was. But you're adjusting your numbers by what we caught there. So how much of the transplant shellfish are you using in your data? You know what I mean? For what we can catch, how much of that swayed that decision?
Are you talking about the 2 million total cohogs?
Yeah. Yes. In other words, what did you use for that rate? Did you use what we caught there? I mean, don't forget, it's just, you know, you haven't even been able to figure out how to dig in there. You know what I mean? So you really don't know from our end of it what's really there until you put a bunch of guys in there, you know what I mean, and actually figure out the bottom. You just threw everybody in on a windy day and said, here, you know, have at it. This is what we got to spend, and everybody's in there trying to make as much as they can. So I don't think our number reflects what's actually there. I think this number is very, very low. And as conservative as you want to be, but I think this number is way off.
So either Connor or Jason have a better understanding, but that 2 million cohogs calculation is the MSY calculation that was created through the assessment model. In that incorporated data, a large variety of factors and information. Connor or Jason, do you mind going into more detail about that data?
Yeah, sure. So Jerry, I think there's like two sources of information here. So the transplant information was all used to inform effectively harvest rates and how fast cohogs would be harvested, regardless of how many we allowed to be harvested, what the certain scenarios would be in terms of like how fast they would be fished down. So it's in that we needed specifically for the Providence River to acknowledge the things like there's a lot of dead stuff up there, and it's the data we have from old transplants may or may not be the best representation for what we would anticipate there. And I would agree it was one day of sampling, but so that could change obviously with different and you know, wind and weather and such, but it is an improvement over having not had any information there really before. And we did look at the CFRF fleet data at 1.2 at harvest rates and such, and at the time industry had advised, or members of industry had advised against using that information because the way we were calculating the rates was actually not appropriate in terms of like using the stop time and end time on the tablets and such, and that they were not representative of what the rates that people were actually fishing. So we did look at a few different sources there. The 2 million cohogs comes from understanding the population size for the entire bay and then scaling it down to these different sizes for the stock. So when we think about, you know, how many cohogs could be harvested from the bay, scaling it down to the Providence River, and scaling it down to just this lower Providence River being open, and then another step of trying to make sure there's some precaution and not exceeding that. You know, this is how we've ended up at 2 million, and to address other things as well, such as, you know, slower growth rates or other things that may be not specified within the model explicitly, but that we need to be considering. So in an even shorter answer, the transplant data was used to inform harvest rates in these different scenarios. The 2 million is from a variety of other data, including the dredge is one piece, but the results were scaled based on the work we did with the calibration with everyone. And then further, all the different things, landings information and the size comp for landings information, as well as a number of other biological attributes for quahog.
Okay, can I have a question for you, if that's okay?
Absolutely.
All right, after a year of this scenario, and you do your test surveys, and you find that your test surveys have not shown any significant drop at all, with what we take out in a year, do we increase the amount?
Yeah, so good question. I think ultimately we could evaluate this annually if we wanted to, and both what worked and didn't work for schedule, as well as the amount and what's sustainable. The 2 million comes from running a model, so we can update that annually to revisit that number for sure, and get a sense of what the likelihood is of even exceeding that number on a given schedule. But yes, that would totally be up for discussion.
All right, I'm sorry if I'm drawing this out, because I'm just totally confused here, and baffled, I should say, by the amount. But anyway, you're using the whole bay as a model. So when we dig in there for a year, whatever schedule we plan on, we dig in there for a year, and then you do your surveys in there, find there's no significant drop at all with the 2 million. Hopefully it doubles that, you know what I'm saying? But now you take into account for the rest of the bay as well, the rate when you do the recalibration for the river, and make that adjustment, or can you just do the river?
Well, we would do both. We would examine just the river as well as the whole bay, as the way that the data comes in. It's no extra effort to do the whole bay.
All right, so I just want to make sure I'm asking it the right way. So if we show, because the rest of the bay, there is a decline. There's definitely a decline in the rest of the bay right now. Hopefully when the water warms up, they pop. But so if there's no significant drop in biomass in the Providence River, then maybe we can adjust it, not accounting for the rest of the bay.
Sure, and I mean the 2 million is specific to the river. Like I think it is specific to just this region that we're talking about. So we model the bay is modeled in the sense that the areas can interact via larval transport. I mean that's the idea, because it should be noted that a bunch of the work that we've done to date has shown that the river is an important source of larval seed for all parts of the bay. So we also don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot for the entire bay by over exceeding a limit in the river. So that is a component of which everything's connected within the model. But to your question, yes, we would evaluate the bay and we'd evaluate the river, but the decision on the river would have some considerations for overall, but our numbers would be based on the river itself.
All right, now when you do a lot of these other like the aquaculture sites and everything, there's a ton of information that's required. Is it possible that we could get what the stock assessment is, get those numbers?
Yeah, in terms of the format, or in terms of like, in what format would you like it in?
Any format. I just want to see what the stock assessments are, so I can put something on file, for the next time we do it, and I can just match them up myself, because we have no information. We're just going by, the screenshots that you provided for us today. We have no information at all.
Sure. So like things like the dredge abundances and things like that. Is that?
Yeah, just just the information that you guys, those screens you had for us before with all the graphs and all that stuff. I mean, those are interesting. I'd like to have them. So when we do this in a year, we can match them up. So we
Absolutely.
can make our own decisions, because like, again, that's, see what's going on.
Yes. Yep. We can do that for sure.
All right. Thank you. Sorry to be a pain, but I just, I'm kind of, this is a little disheartening, because we were all expecting, a possible industry saving, prospect here.
So thanks for your feedback. I mean, and no apologies necessary. And I guess what we're trying to do here is provide a new opportunity, but being cognizant that the river, that we don't want to overfish this region. We want to make sure it's sustainable for years to come, and also recognizing its value as a source of seed for the rest of the bay. So we're trying to meet two objectives at the same time.
If I might add to what Connor had to say there too, one of the key things is when you're going out fishing, what you're doing is sampling what is called this standing crop biomass, or just how much is there. And if it's coming up like crazy, oh, there's loads of quahogs here, there. But as it was mentioning, they really want to focus on what is the sustainable yield, what that is in terms of numbers that are going to be basically coming into the future. That might be 1/5 or sort of around there in terms of the standing suck. So it would seem that there's lots and lots and lots of quahogs there, but what people are kind of interested in that 2 million number is the sustainable number, and that's far below that standing crop biomass.
No, I completely understand, but now my question to you is, how many quahogs are dying because there's too many quahogs there?
Oh, probably. That's the basis of the whole natural mortality rate up there, and I would agree that sort of thinning them out would probably be very good for the quahog populations up there, and that will happen over time. Basically, the industry, if they focus on this over time and focus on that sustainable yield, the larger ones are eventually going to be coming out and be replaced by faster growing and more reproductively active individuals.
Thank you for that, Mike.
Roger Keller has his hand up.
Ah, thank you. Roger.
Roger's muted.
Yeah, Roger, you can unmute yourself.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
About the recreational diggers, if you figured any of them participating in any of these time periods that you have set up or will set up?
So the recreational is going to be am I echoing? Oh. So the recreational management should be similar to the other shellfish management areas with the same kind of limitations set up. So like similar to the Greenwich Bay recreational limits.
But it would be only on the days that you have it open, or because you, right?
Yeah, yep, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry, do you have another question?
Yeah. What West B is raising.
West unmute yourself.
Hi, Dave Gigliotti. I'm looking at this and I'm listening to a lot of what everybody's saying. And I have to say, if you put a number like you're doing with the 2 million core hogs, I have to agree with Jerry. The number is absolutely, that's insanity. It's low. One of the things that we're looking at, from our side of it is, in more simplistic and basic terms, is how many days and the amount of bushels that we can harvest sustainably. Okay. One of the things that I'm looking at here, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around, is the models that you've come up with is that, and I'll take number one at 3 bushels an hour limit for 3 hours, thus 9 bushels a day at 19 days per year. That's very, you're making it almost sound like this is what's going to happen on a per day thing. To me, this is one of those things where it's fishing. So you can't put an amount per hour on that. Okay. It would be easier to digest if you said, okay, this is the amount of bushels that we're doing per day, so many days a week. Okay. I think it was John McDonald mentioned that certain diggers catch more than other diggers, and he's right. That's just the simple, that's just the simple fact of it all. Some guys just catch quicker, but you can't base it on an hourly rate. I mean, if a guy goes in there and you set the limit at 6 bushels per 4 hours, say like on a Greenwich schedule, then if he catches his 6 bushels in an hour, he can go home early. Okay, being that he's an honest guy. So this is tough to wrap our head around. The other thing that's really tough is that you're counting each and every core hog as an individual instead of the volume that we would be taking out, or poundage. Because even though we do count them by piece, it's still at the end of the year, it's a poundage thing. Okay. It is a unique business that's a little bit different than the other fisheries. And if you're trying to regulate it as the other fisheries, I think you're going to have a tougher time. I myself was on that same team as Jerry and Bo Christensen, and we went up there and we did some sampling. And, there are some spots that have larger core hogs, and I can understand you're coming up with 150 or 130 for a bushel, okay, if you're counting large core hogs. Yeah. But to Jerry's point, and to a lot of, I think it was Jared, I'm not sure, but to a couple of the other guys' points, they're not going to take the large core hogs. Those are going to go back in the water, and they're going to work on the smaller stuff. Okay. So the number that you put out is not relative. It's not going to work if you go by the piece. Okay, if you say 2 million core hogs. The other thing is, what is defined as a bushel? I've heard some guys say it's 50 pounds. I've heard others, and even in enforcement, tell me that it was a measure of volume, not weight. So what are we classifying as a bushel? Okay, and how is that put into your model? Okay, because if we're talking a bushel, which is a unit of volume, a measure of volume, then piece-wise, that shouldn't play into our equation. It really shouldn't. It should be, this is the amount of bushels, no matter what the pieces are. Because, and I think it was Jerry that had mentioned, if you're taking a smaller core hog, well, if for say a level 5-gallon pail, you're talking anywhere from 300 to 3 1/4. If they're real small, you could edge up near 350 to 370. Well, that shoots that number right out of the water, because now you've got guys that are targeting the small stuff. But if you're working on larger product, then your target would be met much quicker, and we're losing time. So like I'm looking at this screen, and if you had it as, say, 3 bushels a day, say you follow the Greenwich schedule, okay, 3 days a week, 3 bushels a day, right? That's 5 level 5-gallon pails, right? You're talking 52 days per year. That would essentially, in my eyes, be open every day it didn't rain. Every single day that we were able to go in, then it would be every day. So the number thing is very confusing, very, very confusing. And, you know, I'm the vice president of the Shellfishmen's Association, for those of you guys that don't know me. I try to explain this to my guys, and you have me so bloody confused right now that for me to go back and explain this to them, they'll probably kill me. So if you guys could possibly get this into normal language, okay, and something that's digestible, it would really, really help. Because if I tell my guys, well, we've only got 2 million quahogs we can remove, they will have the same, if not more reaction than Jerry's had, okay? The other thing is that when we talk about openings and closings and things like that, okay, and I know as far as law enforcement's concerned, it would put a strain on them during the summertime, because I know they're more active in the summertime. But one thing we really have to make sure of is that the dealers are on board with what we're doing as well. And why I'm saying this is ultimately we have to be able to move this product. So with that being said, we have to make sure that it's done at an opportune time for market conditions, because right now the way that the market is very, very soft, okay? But I do believe, especially this summer going in, you know, and COVID things relaxing, I think a lot of people are going to be getting out more and going to the restaurants and wanting this product. So I think we have a really good chance of moving that, especially that initial massive influx of product dumped onto the market. Our best times are at the end of, say, June into July and all summer long. But if we go into the later winter months, it may become a little bit problematic. So it's a couple of food for thought, okay? But that 2 million quahog, I agree with Jerry. This is a tough one to wrap your head around. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. This is Connor. I guess a couple quick things, and then I want other people to get a chance to chat. So first, the things that we talk about, like in terms of harvest rate, I think when we show these numbers, like single numbers, we ran the simulation a bunch of times, trying to vary all these things, like how many people would show up on a given day, how fast people fish, like all these different permutations that we've discussed. We didn't show them here. These are averages as a way to try and make it simpler. So I apologize for not having that variability here. And we can do that in the subsequent meeting, but we did work to try and account for all these different variations that you've all described. And I think ultimately, I agree with you that there is a disconnect in like trying to get it into terms that are more relatable to how we're managing the fishery, you know, on bushels per week and such, as opposed to what the model outputs, which is traditional for almost every species that's managed up and down the East Coast in this terms of number of things. I guess perhaps if it's if this already is understandable and such, I apologize. But I guess to contextualize it, what we were trying to put for these bottom, just aside from the 2 million quahogs, like the numbers below in these types of like scenarios, where we tried to put these down to kind of prime people to think about, as an example, on the bottom here, 52 days per year. So what that really means is that if we had a 3-hour opening at a 3 bushel limit, we could have 1 day open a week, or we could have 2 days open a week half the year. that type of scenario. So we didn't have, Monday, Wednesday, Friday examples like that because we were hoping to solicit that from you all or with times of the year. But perhaps we didn't convey that in the cleanest manner. But that's what the days are, and the openings are what we're kind of trying to prime for discussion in terms of then how that relates to the number of to the actual opportunity that's there. So I'm not sure if that's helpful or if that you already understood that, and I apologize if so, but I just wanted to make that clear if it wasn't.
I did, thank you. I did actually, Connor. What is really gonna be tough to, and it is still tough to digest is okay, and again, we're getting wrapped around numbers, but if you take, it says tentatively 2 million core hogs, and then you're talking a bushel, well, the bushel will vary. Okay, what I'm saying by that is the guys are going to go up there and knowing that, say, you're only allowed 3 bushel within X number of hours. And I don't even want to get into who catches what an hour and all of that jazz, because that to me is a subject that's completely different. Okay. But if you have 4 hours to catch, say, 3 bushel, okay, if that guy can only walk out of there with 3 bushel and he's coming up with a mix, whereas he's pulling up 85 necks and the rest is bigs. Well, the bigs are going back over the side and the necks are going in the bucket. And then they're the ones that are going to go back across the line into the shop. So that 2 million number, it's very tough to swallow, because if you have guys up there and they're doing that, and they will do it because we've done it in Greenwich, we had to make any money, then you're shooting that number down substantially. So if you're gauging this opening and closure by number, then we could be talking about a very, very brief opening, okay? As opposed to if you're talking about measuring it in volume, okay? That way, it's a little broader, okay? It's a little broader as far as what we're able to work, fish sustainably. Because I mean, any of the people that have been around this fishery for the last 30 or 40 years, we remember that, okay, if we can only take so many bushel, then the big ones are going to go back. The small ones stay, but the big ones are going to go back, because if you've got 5 buckets of tops and bigs, you've got $150. Okay. And by opening this, even to 2 days a week, is going to impact our days that we are not working it. So this is very important for us as far as sustainability for a week's average pay. If we're only talking 2 to 3 days a week, we have to make it to the point where it's advantageous for us to get in there and do this, but it doesn't crush the rest of the week, if you know what I'm saying. I think you get it, Connor, right? Because if there's an influx, the dealers are moving, the prices will go down, and the rest of the bay is, not doing as well as it maybe should be. This is something that's got to be considered, and 2 million core hogs is not a lot.
Yeah, and I guess so. Yes, it does, and I'll pass the torch after this. But I guess it's the 2 million is what we kind of use for these weeks. So I mean, it's a number that we're using to inform these schedules. But I mean, what we're proposing now is setting up the schedule, like with you all on certain days and such, and trying to move these hours around that's advantageous and enforceable, or advantageous for the fishery as well as enforceable. So I guess that was one reason to not just watch for 2 million cohogs to be landed and then close it. We're trying to set up a system that has some resiliency and some stability, I guess, for you all by picking schedules. So I'm sorry if that doesn't answer either, but just wanted to offer that.
So when we look at the bay, when you guys actually look at what is brought out of the bay at the end of the year, are you going by, and again, this kind of lends to what I'm saying. Do you go by the number of core hogs that is reported in SAFIS? Because a large portion of those core hogs are hogs, and they're done by weight. Now, anytime that I've sat in on meetings, typically I've always heard about X number of poundages coming out of the bay for a certain year. When we're talking about, core hogs or clams or any shellfish, I've always heard more about the weight coming out than the amount of pieces, which, and again, on the big product, it would be weight, not pieces. Now, is that how you guys gauge and use your model? Because you said that you use the bay as the whole. Now, how did you break that down? And how does that relate to one specific area? Because if you take the bay as the whole, you're talking the lower bay, which is basically not fished anymore at all. The mid bay, area B and area A, they're fished, intermittently. Well, area B is more now. Everybody's in B or the East Passage, and area A is intermittently. So when you come up with your numbers for this, and you take in the whole bay, that's skewing that number as well, because you're talking about a much richer area than the rest of the bay.
So I guess I'll try and answer the first question first. We look at both. We can look at both total pounds, like in traditional sense, and we can look at numbers based on based on the information that we get on number of cohogs by different size classes, and then converting weights and numbers and such, and other data that's used to inform bushel limits or number of cohogs per bushel by size and such. So in short, we have the ability to look at the information in all different ways, and we will do so depending on whether it's a assessment model or a seafood marketing collaborative initiative or whatever it might be. So we look at them in these various in all different ways. And I guess to your question about the bay, in the model, we don't know what the harvest. There's no harvest information to support information on the Providence River right now, obviously, because there isn't landings coming out of it. But we do use all the available information that we can in terms of total landings and size composition, and what and as well as what we saw in the river to date from the various projects. So we do have spatially explicit information from the river that we're using to inform these numbers. So hopefully that's helpful, but I want to give other people, I know Anna, I know Mike McGivney said he's having some mute problems or audio problems. I'm not sure if you can unmute him or not, and I'm not sure who else has got their hand raised, but just wanted to flag.
Okay, thanks for letting me know about that. I have a couple other hands raised too. Let me see. Let me just find Mike.
Sorry to take so much time. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate your feedback.
Mike, I just sent you a request to unmute.
Yeah, I have a question like everybody else. Just to confirm, what was the amount of land per bushel that you used for a model?
Sorry, that was really garbled. Do you mind repeating that?
How many claims per bushel are you using for race? Clams per bushel.
How many clams per bushel?
Yes.
Okay. So Connor, do you mind going back to that previous slide with the breakdown of the data from the transplant? Yes, thank you. So we used a average of 163 clams per bag. That was the rate that we used. Is that the question you were asking?
Well, if you can't hear me, doesn't matter. A bushel is actually 8 ounces, so I think the whole math thing is kind of screwed up.
Do you mind repeating that?
A bushel is 8 gallons. Bags you're counting for 5 gallons. So I'm just wondering, I might have put that together.
So something's up with your speaker. Maybe you could type into the comments of your question. Would that work?
Okay, I'll click.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Well, Mike's doing that. Okay. Yeah, Mike, maybe you could try telephoning in for audio.
Actually, I have my telephone on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just turn the audio off on your computer because it's echoing.
Okay.
All right.
So, can you hear now?
Yeah, it's still echoing on your computer audio. Mike, are you still there?
Yeah.
It's I'm sorry, I'm still having difficulty hearing you.
Kevin, stop.
Mike, are you there? Maybe just typing in the question would be easiest. I'm sorry. Well, Mike is typing that question. Let's move to, it looks like Jerry has another question.
Yes, I do. I have a question. Actually, I saw in here you want input and some different scenarios. Why don't we just, something that's worked forever for us, the Greenwich schedule. Open it up for 4 hours, like 6 or 7 bushels. 3 days a week. The same Greenwich schedule. Started over there in June, July, and just go from there. Because I don't know how many days we get in Greenwich. We figure once it starts raining, we're not going to get all the every day in up there. And when it runs out, it runs out.
Mhm.
Jerry, can you say that one more time for me, just so I have it down?
Well, we have all these crazy scenarios, 1 hour, 3 bushels, and 4 hours, all this, but there isn't anything, like the same as the Greenwich schedule. You open it up for 4 hours, 8 to 12, 3 days, the same as the Greenwich schedule, and you just put like a 6, 7, 8 bushel, like 6 bushels a day, and then you just run that out.
And what were you suggesting per week? Sorry, I missed that.
Well, it'll be 12 hours a week, 18 bushels, 6 bushels. Have to put something here that makes sense to me anyway, because all these different scenarios here, open it at 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. Just have to put something that we're familiar. We know what the Greenwich schedule and the Bristol schedule is, 8 to 12. And we can, and it seems to work well. And you don't have to worry about getting, let's see, 4 hours. You don't have to worry about getting, what is it, 12 bushel, whatever many bushel you allow an hour.
Right. So then maybe when we come back in April, we'll present that exact example of like what that would look like for how many days, like
Right,
how long that would run for.
Right, I mean, I'm sure there'd be, some, you can mess with this, with that kind of equation, but there's something that makes some sense, on our end anyway,
Mhm.
because I'm not going up there 1 day, 2 hours. That's just insane.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
just want to present the range of options and.
Right, but the range of options doesn't include something that we're used to,
Mhm.
just put like something up there like that. So that some guys aren't going to catch us, at the same rate as the other guys. So if you put the maximum amount of core hogs in for 2 hours, and some guys aren't, they just don't catch that good, they're screwed, just give everybody the same chance.
No, that feedback is exactly what we're looking for, Jerry. So I appreciate that. So like, I guess perhaps to guide the larger conversation, are there other thoughts in terms of, days a week, hours,
No,
bushels?
Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I mean, I'm sure, we can hire more cops. We need more cops anyway, right? So just, it's just gonna, once we get used to the schedule, it's gonna be just like Greenwich. You know what I mean? You don't have to work, they don't have to have, enforcement like riding around all the time. It's just, there's not, according to you, there's really not gonna be that many guys up there. And I just, but another question I have is if you do it on the next meeting, the April meeting, and we have all the different, we propose all the different scenarios in April. So how are you gonna, so basically you're gonna say, okay, everybody make your proposals, and then we're gonna figure out what's the best, and everybody's gonna vote on it. And then, but we have a meeting like right away, you know what I mean, to make the determination. So, isn't that kind of cramming things up, or do you have plenty of time for that too?
Yeah, so we have in terms of an implementation, you mean?
No, but from the time that, you make the recommendations on our end, like I'm doing now, to the time you get to, put them forward.
Yeah, I mean, we have time both for the work in terms of getting the different scenarios coming back in April, as well as then ultimately the SAP providing a recommendation to the council, and then bringing those recommendations forward, as well as any other comments that may come in that they want to review outside of the SAP's recommendation.
Right. So that'll be at the next meeting, but there will be another meeting after that meeting to decipher everything that's being proposed at the next meeting to go forward.
Right now, we have it planned. I think that third meeting you're talking about is what the council will vote on.
Okay, so we're gonna just throw a bunch of proposals at them, and then the council decides after but we don't have a chance to for a recommendation, right?
You do, absolutely. We would do it at you would all.
The next SAP meeting, so everybody brings their proposals to the next SAP meeting and we vote on one or two or whatever.
Yeah, you would propose like, and you could say the SAP recommends that the council adopt this schedule or one of these schedules, for example.
Okay, wouldn't it be beneficial if like Mike and Dave give you a proposal and you could put it on the screen like my proposal, and then, you know what I mean, and that type of thing, so we have something to look at the next meeting?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're hoping for. So
Yeah.
people will give us those now,
Okay.
however many slew of them, and
All
then
right,
we would bring them before you guys in April.
Oh, that's perfect. That way there, we won't have to, worry about, doing all the calculations at the next meeting. You do all the calculations, at the next meeting to find out which is, beneficial or not. So you actually encouraging everybody to put them forward now.
Exactly. And
Exactly.
that's why, and we
Right.
wanted to get that feedback now so we can do all the number crunching between now and then. And then,
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
yeah, absolutely.
James has had his hand up for a bit. James, you feel free. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Anna, Connor. For those of you on the phone, I'm Jim Boyd. I was quahogging full-time back in the 80s and 90s, and when the Upper Bay opened at that time, it was the Wild West because DEM sold 2,500 licenses in 1 week when they announced the Upper Bay opening above Rocky Point. That's not going to happen this time. It's only going to be those who have licenses. And so you're not going to see the Wild West. And so I think your estimate of 100 to 120 guys is probably realistic based on existing licenses. But to Jerry's point, and Dave talked about this quite a bit as well, I think the biggest source of confusion here is the fact that in your harvest scenarios, you are assigning a uniform catch rate for everyone as part of that harvest scenario, and that's just not realistic. I think the easiest way to bring forth a harvest scenario here is to look at hours and bushels for any particular day, whether it's 2 days a week or 3 days a week. Given our opening, I think, Jerry's suggestion of a Greenwich Bay style management of this is probably a good one. And whether it's 2 or 3 days a week, to Dave's point, he raised about moving the product. The last thing we want to do is have guys running around with bushels of quahogs in the back of their truck, not being able to sell them to a dealer because a dealer has more than they need. So my concern was, one of the issues raised in the law enforcement slide, and that is, openings during the summer when there's sort of limited enforcement personnel available. Well, that's really the opportune time to move Shellfish between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Anything earlier or later than that time period is going to be more difficult for the dealers to move. And the last thing I want to point out is that even if you have 2 or 3 days a week between, say, Memorial Day and Labor Day, you're going to lose a substantial amount of days because of rainfall closures. This is going to be a half-inch rainfall closure. And so this morning, since I'm a data-driven kind of guy to make decisions, I looked at rainfall events in Rhode Island from last June 1st to August 31st, and there were 9 days with a half-inch or more precipitation. So that's 9 weeks of closure that would happen, assuming you get 9 days of rain with a half-inch this summer between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So you want to keep that in mind as well. But I think a lot of points raised by the fishermen here need to be considered, and I'll leave it at that. But thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dave. And I guess I would just ask, the one thing that I guess we haven't captured well, that I guess is a little bit is different than what you stated, was it does capture varying harvest rates. I mean, the idea is that we're not assigning everybody a single harvest rate. We're assigning in coming up with these total number of days. The idea is that we're, over a bunch of different times, varying the number of participants, somewhere centered around 100, and then varying their harvest rate based on information we have available on harvest rate. And what you're looking at is ultimately translating that sum of how many quahogs that comes out on a given opening or day to then how we calculate how many days can become available. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Connor. Understood. But I think, could you move to that slide, if you will, please?
Yes.
Harvest scenario slide.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, when you look at these different scenarios of a rate of catch of so many bushels per hour, I think that's just adding to the confusion here. It's just simpler terms. How many bushels and how many hours, assuming there's going to be 100 guys up there. And rather than look at the number of quahogs, figure out what your volume is for your maximum sustainable yield, and then translate that down to bushels and hours per person. And then you've got your magic number, I think. But anyway.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, that's what this, yeah, I guess it's not conveyed here. So we'll work. We don't need to drill into it now, but we will work to make that clearer. That's what this is intended to do here. But we'll come back in April with both scenarios as we talked with Jerry, and as others have as others have comments, but we'll think of an easier way to describe this to people. So I appreciate that.
Jerry, you have your hand raised?
No, I'm sorry, I forgot to take it down. Thank you.
That's okay.
I guess, Anna, if I may, so the type of feedback that Jerry gave was really helpful in terms of coming back. So if people either want to enter in the chat different scenarios that they want, like for example, both like when it would open, how long you would want it, and then certain days a week and bushels and hours, we can come back and show what the numbers look like at that next meeting. I mean, you could reach out to us in between now and then too, but it would be, it would be helpful. And then coming back, we can tell you whether this amount can get us through that, like through a period that you desire, or whether it would have to be cut short based on what we think the river can sustain. So, so whether it's a 3-hour opening 2 days a week at 6 or 3 or 9 or whatever your proposal is, we can bring it back to you in April, and you can provide that feedback now, or you can in between. But I wanted to, I know that we've been working through this for a couple hours, and this is really good conversation, but I just wanted to make sure that, we can take some feedback in terms of bringing back to you simpler and clear scenarios. So just want to make sure we get that information.
And to follow up with just what Connor's saying, what I will do is, first off, these slides will be put up online. I'm also going to circulate these to all the SAP members in email. I will work on trying to reword this summary here into something that's more sensible and easier to understand and explain to other people. So it's written out kind of like you would interpret the Greenwich Bay management scenario. And if you need the time to think about these options more, you can submit comments to me in advance of the next SAP meeting so that we can compile all those comments and feedback and scenario options into a presentation to share with everyone. I will try to share that before the SAP meeting so that everyone has a chance to review those. So I'll send an email to all the SAP members, giving you kind of a deadline to get those comments to me so that I can compile them all and then recirculate them all to everyone to review in advance of the SAP meeting too. See a couple more hands raised. Angelo.
Hi, sorry, I'm just sitting on the sidelines and it's going to offer something that I think might help a little bit here. I think the confusion came in with trying to explain the inputs to the population model so that people would have an understanding as to where this limit that you're used to hearing about comes from. But I wonder if it'd be helpful to give a rough indication. 2 million cohogs, if people are going to throw out scenarios, can you convert that to roughly how many bushels a year? So if somebody has a scenario in mind, they'll know if they're way off what you think the sustainable yield is. And I thought that might be helpful to kind of throw out 2 million cohogs. If they're all small, it's this many bushels. If they're a mixture, it's this many bushels.
Oh, that's a very good point. I appreciate that.
You got a question, but I'm sorry.
Yep. No, go ahead, Jerry.
You mentioned the beginning about water quality. Is this ready? Is water quality ready now? I mean, they can just say whatever happens with fish and wildlife, we can go ahead and start working, Or is there still stuff we're waiting on water quality?
So I'm going to defer this to David Borkman or Angelo, but yeah, so I'll let them answer that question.
Hey, Anna, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Dave, thanks.
Hi, this is Dave Borkman from Water Resources. And yeah, we've got just about everything in place. So once, everything is lined up with the fisheries assessment and with industry for an opening, we're set on the water quality end pretty much. There's a few loose ends to tidy up, but it's not much.
Okay, not to be, but I've talked to Angelo for many years. Hi, Angelo, and we've been real close on a couple of things. A lot of times, with a few loose ends, makes you kind of nervous. But I mean,
Yeah,
that this is going to happen.
Well, Angelo's here. He can weigh in. His word has more weight than mine on it.
Well, I told Cindy she could not retire until she finished the report. So she worked to the last minute. And so one of the reports that was dragging its feet was looking at how dilution from the wastewater treatment plants, if there were failure of treatment. So we have that done. What Dave's talking about, it really just adding a couple of minor sentences from that report into our management plan. So yeah, so it's definite now. I got so sick of telling everybody we're almost done. So
I remember those.
So at this point, the plan would be, we'll have it done, but it would add too much confusion. We're not going to jump in front of marine fisheries and call it a conditional area, but you can't go there yet because we don't have a management plan. So we'll all be on the same page, and we'll announce both of them at the same time.
So you made FDA, EPA, and all the rest of them real happy now?
Well, they say that FDA says they don't approve things. They just look at them after the fact. So at this point, we're satisfied, and we're not asking them because they said they don't really approve stuff anyway.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Yeah, and I can add that the area, at least as far as water quality, has met conditional criteria for at a half-inch closure scenario for several years now. So, we have that to support the case if need be.
Great, thank you, both of you. Jim, I still see your hand raised. Do you have another question?
Not a question, just one last comment. I think it was mentioned earlier, but one of the important factors here is going to be the flexibility in the regulations in the event that there's quite a bit of harvest coming out of there that's going to depress the market and perhaps exceed your MSY, at least on a timescale basis. So you're going to want to make sure that you've got the kind of flexibility you need to be able to, take it down to 1 day a week if needed, or close it for a period of time, whatever it is. The flexibility needs to be in there to meet the needs of the industry as well as the resource.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Jerry, your hand is raised.
I keep forgetting to take it down, sorry.
That's okay. So again, if you want to, as Connor said, submit any suggestions, maybe need more time to think about this since we've just presented this all this information to you, but submit suggestions and feedback through email to me. Ask me any questions you may have, and I'm gonna pull all that information together for you and lay it out so that you have all of this when it comes to revisiting all this during the next SAP, which is when you will vote and provide your feedback to the Marine Fisheries Council. So it's been a couple hours here. We have one more item on the agenda. So if you have any questions, now's the time. Otherwise, we're gonna move on to Welk.
I do. I have one more question because Mike's not here, so I'm going to speak on behalf of the association just to clarify things.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys are going to take all of the recommendations that you're getting, and then we'll look at those again at the next meeting, at the next SAP meeting, and then vote on a proposal to send forward to the council. Is that, am I correct in that?
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to compile all of the recommendations that you submit to me, and I'm going to set a deadline so that I have a few days beforehand that I can send them out to you to also review in advance of the SAP, so you're not presented to them on that day. You get to review them then we're going to go over them again on a presentation and vote and make a decision and recommendation to the Marine Fisheries Council.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, any other questions? All right, I'm gonna let Tom take over now on Welk.
Hey, everybody. Interesting discussion. Okay, so with Welk, what we got going here is the Marine Fisheries here has received some funding through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service under state wildlife grants to do some more in-depth Welk maturity study. We have contracted with Roger Williams University, Roxana Smolowitz, many of you know her over there. And what it's going to be is a 2-year study starting here in June 2021 and running through essentially October of 2022, with samples being collected for female channeled Welk only, because they're the ones that we seem to have an issue with on their maturity schedule. And what we are planning to do is to take samples each month from June through October in the next 2 years, a fairly limited number of samples. What I've got is 4 different size groups that I'm going to look at, encompassing some sublegal range and into the legal size range, to essentially look at the gonads on a microscopic histological basis and compare the findings with that from the work that I did previously using a visual and macroscopic methodology to assess maturity. What this means is that each year I'm looking at 5 whelks for each size group for each month. So that's 20 snails per month and 100 snails per year. The ovaries will be removed and examined microscopically, and an assessment made of their maturity status. And that will then be compared with, again, what I determined previously as the size of maturity, using, again, the visual and macroscopic methodologies. And in order to do this, what I really am looking for is some industry assistance, particularly to get sublegal snails. We don't see enough of them in our surveys to get the numbers that I'm really looking for. So in order to get 5 female channeled whelk per size group each month, I would probably need to look at upwards of maybe 20 snails from each of those sublegal size groups. Well, actually all the size groups, to get the 5 females that I need. And that's just, again, just I'm looking to try to get some assistance from the industry. Probably just only need 1 or 2 harvesters to help provide those, particularly the sublegal size snails for the study. And that's really pretty much it. If anybody is interested, my phone number is 423-1931. Give me a call, or you can get my email online or wherever. It's get in touch with me and let me know if you'd be interested. This will hopefully provide a much more accurate determination of when our snails are maturing than what I provided again in the previous study. So that's pretty much it.
All right. Thank you, Tom, for that.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity for letting me present this today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Katie, are you still on? All right, I'm not seeing her anywhere. So I will say that we adjourn for the evening. Thank you everyone for tuning in and for all your feedback. And again, contact me with any questions and comments. And I'll be list serving the next SAP meeting next week. All right, have a good evening, everyone.